Well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, I have another fantastic and a really fun guest for you today. Joining us is going to be Marine veteran Jeff Sornig, and he is a fantastic artist of many, just countless skill sets here. So we're going to get into that. But as I often do, Jeff, to bring you on, we'll do a fun little radio check. How do you read me? Over?
Lima Charlie, over.
Yeah, leave it, Charlie. That's fantastic.
Rough.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could join us. I'm super excited and pumped. Let's dive right into it. I always ask guests if you could, before we get into today and what you're doing now and your incredible talent. Let's go back in time. Let's to use a comic book reference. Let's do your origin story.
Sure.
Walk us through why you joined the service, what the circumstances were, and specifically the branch and the job. I'm very curious about that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, so I graduated high school 1,000 years ago in the late 80s. There weren't a lot of prospects for us back then. Military service was just the way out of a small rural northern Michigan town. We're just like, all right, what are we gonna do? College wasn't gonna happen. You're not gonna just kick around town, so you got to get out of here. But I've also got personal family history in the Marine Corps. My grandfather was on Guadalcanal and Midway during World War II.
Oh wow.
And then my dad was Vietnam Marine. So, I definitely had that. I wasn't a military brat per se, but, I grew up, with sort of military heritage in the family going all the way back to my great grandfather was in the Army in World War One.
Hmm.
So, over that course of my life, the influence was there. Didn't even know it, but the seed was planted early. Um, so the funny story is, in high school you take the ASVAB, right? You either take the ACT or the SAT, and us, kids at work thinking ACT, SAT took the free ASVAB.
Right, right.
So then you end up on the recruiter's grad list, right? They know who their people are that took tests. And one early Saturday morning, I get my mom wakes me up out of the rack like, "Hey, you got a phone call?" I'm like, "Who the hell is calling me this early?" And it's a Navy recruiter. "Hey, how would you like to come down and see what the Navy has to offer?" And I'm like, "Nah, I'm not into it. I don't want to be on a ship." And then I started getting cocky for some reason as a dumb 17-year-old kid. I'm like, and if I joined anything, it'd be the Marine Corps.
That's right.
Navy recruiter must have gone right down the hallway to the Marine recruiter, and here handed my phone number. You go, "Here you go. Here's one for you." And I kid you not, the very next weekend, same time, like 0809, phone rings, phone call. What? This time it was a completely different conversation. I hadn't been, like barked at like that over the phone in a minute. And it was like, "Hey stud, how you doing?" I'm like, "Whoa, what's up?" You know, they're like, "Be down in my office at 2 o'clock today." And I'm like, click. I'm like, I guess I gotta go, right? He's with the government. That's how these things work. So walked into the Marine recruiter's office, and it was like, "What do you want to do for the Marines?" And I'm like, "I mean, up until a half hour ago, I didn't even know I wanted to be in the Marine Corps until you got me down here, but here I am." And I said, because I was kind of like the art kid in high school, I was like, "Well, I don't know. Well, who does your recruiting posters?" Like, we hire people to do that. I was like, "I don't know. My dad was an MP. Let me do that." And he kind of like flips through his chart. We don't have any boat spaces, and boat spaces is a term for no quotas. So, okay, well, I don't know then. And so here's where dumb young 17-year-old Jeff just agrees to go in on what's called open contract, which
Oh,
if you're in the military of any branch, you automatically know open contract is the dumbest option to enlist on, because that basically means you left your fate to the service to decide for you. And that's what I did. I went in open contract. Now again, this is late 80s. I was standing on the yellow footprints in San Diego 2 weeks after the very first time of stepping in that recruiter's office. That's called direct ship. So I didn't even have time to process, what I had done,
right.
and I was already like, Now, of course, all my friends made me watch Full Metal Jacket about 1,000 times that week before, because I'd signed the contract. I knew I was going. I had my ship date, and they're like, "Hey, come on over. Let's have some beers and watch your movie." So like 18, you're doing like the secret beer with buds, and every one of them would throw on Full Metal Jacket. I'm like, here we go. Okay, so I mean that movie is ingrained in every Marine's head
Of
anyway. But
course, of
yeah,
course.
so that was the start.
Oh, that's fantastic, and I got to give props to the recruiting station that was on it.
And he saw me coming a mile away. I went, oh, I got this sucker.
Yeah, well, that's great. So you did your training in San Diego, of course, and then
Yep.
what was the first duty station? How did everything go travel wise from there?
Yeah. So I mean, from Michigan, bounce over to San Diego, and I guess we didn't get into that part. And we're at boot camp, and they start handing out, MOSs. It looks like you've made it. You're gonna graduate. Congratulations. Here's your MOSs. And again, it's like the Full Metal Jacket scene. Drill instructor barking out MOSs. Duh, duh. He gets to me. Sornig, admin. Duh, bah, bah. And I'm like, admin? Admit advertising. I made it. Like, hey, I got it anyway. Total, boot move, didn't know. And I find one of the other guys who was a contract 01. So the OC field, occupational field, the Marine Corps is 0100. I find this guy. I'm like, hey, what are we doing? He's like, oh, you're gonna work in an office. And I was like, it's not a job the Marines have. How did I end up with that? I didn't even take typing in high school. Like, how the hell did they find out I was gonna be in, this field? But that's what they did to me. So after boot leave, I ended up back out in Southern California. Went to Camp Del Mar, and that was where personnel admin school was at the time. We had a West Coast and an East Coast. So I went through Del Mar, and first duty station was First Battalion, Second Marines. So that was super fun because that was at a time when General Gray was our commandant, and his motto was, I'm looking for warriors to follow me. So to be in an infantry battalion, even though I was an H&S company, we all still did all the same fun stuff that the guys did.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. High tempo, good morale back then.
Oh yeah, yeah. And we were so like nowadays, all the administrators are housed in giant, what they call IPAC, installation personnel admin centers, you know, massive, just really officey type stuff, which I feel bad for those Marines because we were at the unit level, at the battalion level, going deploying and doing all the fun things that Marines like to do.
That's
So yeah, that was North Carolina. So MOS school to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and yeah, so
that's fantastic. And you did quite a few years. You actually made it to retirement with the Marine Corps, correct?
I did. Yeah, I did 20, a little over 23 and a half years. So
Oh, congratulations. That's fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
goes by one enlistment at a time. Anybody who's done the career will tell you that too. It's like once you get past that first one, if you re-enlist, maybe nowadays things have changed, but like back then it was like if you became a career, so first termer is your first 4 years. If you
Yep.
re-enlist, now you're considered into the career force, because now they got you for 8. Once you get to 8, if you re-enlist that third time and go to 12,
Yeah.
that's over the hump, and you're like, well, might as well keep going
Might as
now.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, I got to Camp Lejeune at 1-2 in early 90, late 89. So our battalion was on what we call air alert, and that's where your infantry battalion is staged, prep, ready to go in case the red star cluster goes up and you gotta take off. And Marines being the expeditionary nature that we are, we were like, but that's just it's like a routine thing that all battalions were going through. And we had just come off of our air alert status, had gone on a 2-week block leave period, came back to Camp Lejeune, and then the CO had a TV in his area, and back then it was like cable was still barely a thing, right? And
Right.
CNN was on, and all of a sudden there's kind of like this buzz, like, hey, some guy just went into Kuwait. We're all like looking at the globe like, Kuwait? What? Who? Saddam? Who the heck is that?
Right.
And because our trash was still packed in the parking lot, they were like, well, you're going.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we within like him going into Kuwait, however the marching orders come down from the top, we embarked on board the USS Guam down in Morehead City, North Carolina. Our battalion, a bunch of I mean, it was like the scenes you see in like old World War II footage, just thousands of Marines sleeping on sea bags and gear on the port as we're waiting to get aboard our ships and take off, get underway. And so yeah, we sailed across the Atlantic through the Suez Canal, up around the Strait of Hormuz and into the Persian Gulf. And got to have some fun in the Persian Gulf. We would do these little things called Operation Sea Soldier, where we jump on 46s, fly off the ship, land somewhere, in the desert, kind of do like little fake maneuvers, jump back on the helicopters, back to the ship, always, that sort of deception thing.
Yeah.
Saddam facing out toward the sea, as well as, the massive ground invasion ready to run over the top of him. But then it was like right a week before the UN deadline. That was when everything kicked off in Somalia. And we got a call, through the headquarters that the U.S. Embassy was under siege and needed rescue. So our ship, the USS Guam and the USS Trenton, broke away from the battle fleet and at flag speed tried to get as fast as possible out of the Persian Gulf down to the Horn of Africa to go evacuate the U.S. Embassy.
Wow.
We were like hours out, and it was pretty dire. And so they loaded up a bunch of our infantry guys from our platoons that were on board the ship with us onto some CH-53 Super Stallions, and they launched them out. They had to refuel in the air, and so they land at the embassy way in advance of the ship. They're on their own, and they secure the compound. There's no incidents. Everybody, like, I guess the Somalis see the Marines land at the compound. They're like, all the fighting was happening all around the embassy, but they didn't engage the Marines.
Yeah.
And so we ended up evacuating 281, embassy personnel and their families from multinational, background back to the Guam and the Trenton. And, a couple of guys that I know that were in the, in the grounds, they said as that last helo peeled away with the Marines on it, they could just see everybody, engage the compound. They're like, all right, it's empty now, we can go in. And they just overran the perimeter after the last helo pulled out. But that was called Operation Eastern Exit, and hardly anybody's ever heard of it because the world was focused on what was happening in the Gulf as the UN deadline was approaching, and hear this whole embassy situation. So that was basically the precursor to the Black Hawk Down era in '92. But yeah, so that was an interesting twist into the Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I had not heard that about your ship. I had not heard that story before. That's wild.
Yeah.
So typical Marines, though. You know how to pivot and move on a moment's notice. So it doesn't matter where the fight is. You'll just go.
Right. We actually ended up with 282 evacuees because one of the ladies was pregnant and she gave birth on the Guam. So,
wow.
Yeah. Talk about a birthday story that kid's got.
That's a story. Yeah. No party will ever impress that kid. No. My
right?
first one had thousands of Marines. There was a boat.
Yep. It was so the ship we were on is called LPH, Landing Platform Helicopter. So we had squadron CH-46 out of HMM 263 New River, and the CH-53s from HMM 365, and also out of the New River squadrons.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Now, did you stick for the most part with the same MOS and type of division the whole time? Did you?
I did actually, yeah. I mean, so like, the first 4 years went by pretty quick because, again, like right out of the gate, we're deployed for,
Right.
9 months to Desert Storm. When we got back to Lejeune, we had like 4 months, and then the Marine Corps had restarted what we called the unit deployment program. And that's again where just battalions routinely, take up and go to Okinawa. So we were gone for 8 or 9, back to Lejeune for 4, and then gone for another 6, straight to Okinawa. And as a young single guy, we were like, hey, this is great. I can't imagine all of our married Marines. There was being an admin, we saw a lot of divorce packages come through, unfortunately, like a lot of that. That's too much deploying. I can't handle.
Yeah. It's tough on the family, but like you said,
Oh,
when
for
you're
sure.
a young,
Yeah.
when you're a
Now I
young,
get it. Oh yeah. I mean, I turned 20 in the desert, and then I turned 21 in Okinawa. So,
it's fantastic.
but yeah, by 21 years old, you'd already been to all these really wild places. And I had never done that if it hadn't been for the Marine Corps in that particular era. So,
Yeah, yeah, a lot of frequent flyer miles, a lot of
yeah.
a lot of stickers, a lot of travel stickers on the old sea bag there. Yeah,
Yeah. 20 years old, you already got 7 months and 29 days of career sea duty. It's like, that's good.
that's
And a lot of
fantastic.
Marines don't, oddly enough, it's like, to be on ship as a Marine, you know,
You know,
that's where you need to be, I guess.
absolutely. So, well, with all those, I mean, early on with all those missions, that's high tempo, right? So you're
Yeah.
kind of tuned up, and then hopefully things settle down for a little bit, and then probably towards the end things sped up again for you.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I'm just wondering, you know, I agree with what you said about the enlistments because I I was that eight-year fellow. My 8 years expired while I was overseas, and I had to figure out if I was going to reenlist or not. And
Right.
I frankly it was a torturing decision, but I wound up getting out after 8 years, and most of my friends stayed in and got redeployed and redeployed and redeployed,
Right.
and that was chaos for a lot of them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious with you because I picked up on the timing of where everything happened. So okay, walk me through like you got over the 12-year mark. Now where's your career? Now what are you thinking? Because the world was changing once again at that point. And what was your
Yeah.
mindset about, if you're going to get through retirement, how was that going to go? Um, and what was your plans post service as far as I know plans don't always come out the way that you want them to, but what was
Right.
your thought? Like, okay, here's a trajectory, here's where I'm thinking. How did that work out for you towards the tail end of the career?
Yeah. I mean, again, kind of like flip it backward a little bit. So after that Okinawa trip, got back to Lejeune, and that was almost the end of my first 4 years. So I did end up getting out. Like I did 4. I
Oh,
tried
okay.
to re-enlist, and at that point, when the career planner, who's the guy that what we call our retention specialist in the Marine Corps,
Mhm.
calls you and says, "Hey, what do you want to re-enlist?" I was like, "Yeah, but I want a lat move. I want to get out of admin." I was a unit diary clerk specifically. That's 0131 MOS back then, and we're the guys that do all the computer data dink stuff. But I was like, now I knew I had my hands on an MOS manual. I knew exactly what to ask for. I was like, I want to be a 4611 combat illustrator, the stuff that I should have known way back when to tell the recruiter instead of letting him send me down range in an open contract. It's like, I want to be a 4611. And he's like, same thing. He flips, looks at his seat. There's no quotas for that. Sorry, you can reenlist for your same MOS retention on station. I'm like, 3 more years in second Mar Div? You're crazy, bro. I'm gone. So I got out, came back to Detroit, and that was, 93. And you're in the post Desert Storm drawdown. Every branch had blown up their total force for the war. And then everybody was offered what they call, Terra, temporary early retirement. They were offered incentives to separate. Like they were trying to purge weight because, by Congress, you can only have so many folks on active duty at any given point. Well, they had given, had special authorization to exceed that for the war. Now we're back to peacetime, throw up the air quotes, and you got to drop that total force, right? So you had more than enough, service members from whatever branch that were like, yep, I'm done, I'm getting out. And then you had folks who were like, oh, well, I'll get out. And then you had your normal end of active service attrition. So all of that combined helps get you back down to your target goal. I was one of those with thousands and thousands of young men and women re-entering the civilian workforce. And I came back to Detroit. I couldn't find a job. At 23 years old, I'm a veteran. Mm-hmm. And, my skills were, administrative and then just the general Marine stuff. And back in Michigan in 93, that didn't translate to a hill of beans. They were like, right. So I ended up joining the Marine Reserve, doing the 1 weekend a month thing.
Oh, there you
go. I did that for a year, and the I&I staff, inspector instructor staff, were the active duty guys that run the Marine Reserve unit, essentially. And I got in really good with those folks. And I was like, I need back on active duty. And at that point, there was no allowing, really prior service Marines back on active duty. It was a one-way door. You got out, you were done. But there was a weird middle ground. And at that point, it was called full-time support, where you're back on active duty. And for all intents and purposes, you're an active duty Marine. But your sole sort of function is your indirect support of the reserve component, which means you end up on I&I duty, you end up in different capacities like that. I think in the Army they call it AG.
Yeah, AGR. Yeah.
Yep. So Marine Corps.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I ended up back on active duty through the FTS program, and then that was it. I didn't come back out. So.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, I didn't realize you had a break in service, and that's how you wound up going into what I would have called AGR. That's fantastic. That's a very, like you said, there's a very small amount of people that can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And and again, for the only difference, in the component is the fact that my promotions and retention, like re-enlistment quotas and stuff, I was competing, against other Marines within the FTS program, not the active component, what we call Comp Code 11.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah, the peacetime years after, so got back on active duty. Those are kind of boring. We had General Krulak and General Jones as commandant, and there wasn't anything to do, right? So what do you do when you have a whole bunch of Marines that their sole function in life is to go and do a thing, and we're just in garrison back in the States? It was a lot of inspections and uniform changes for weird reasons. We're
dress right, dress.
Yeah, we got to find something for you guys to do. So that was when I remember hearing the kinder, gentler Marine Corps term. We're like, what the hell is this? But yeah, and so it was at that point, I had met my wife. She was also a Marine, so we were both young corporal sergeants together, and I guess we got stationed in Kansas City, Missouri, and I was at this position called the Manpower Information System Support Office. And for those in the Marine Corps admin world, that's you made it. You're at MISO, you're the super brain of your field. And so we did that for a few years, got promoted to staff sergeant, and we got transferred to Quantico in January of 2001. And we had just had our son, who was born in Bethesda, and then 9/11 happened, being in Quantico.
Yeah.
It turned everything upside down. At that point, we were working at Headquarters Marine Corps. All the insanity that ensued, on 9/11. And then we just, the rest of the career, from 2001 until, I retired in 2012, was just a series of activations, sourcing Marines to fill deployment gaps, activating battalions, and just the op tempo went through the roof. And at that point, it just becomes like a blur. It's just all the days mashed together, and before you know it,
Yeah.
11 years has gone by, and you're like, oh, I guess time to retire. But I mean, you know, it's kind of strange because like when we're in Quantico, as 2001 kicks off, and then those first deployments start happening in 2003. We're at a headquarters billet, which wasn't deployable. You're not in an active force unit. And from Quantico, I ended up getting stationed at Joint Forces Command down in Norfolk. Again, another, it's a combatant command, but it's very, it's not operational. You're a headquarters unit. And so again, my whole job in Quantico was sourcing other Marines to go forward and fill, individual augment billets. So, I remember asking my colonel a couple of times, I'm like, hey, sir, can I jump on one of these IA billets? And he's like, at this point, I'm gunny. He's like, Gunny, if I let you go, I get no one to do your job. So no, stop asking me. You're not going. And it's just killing you, right? Because you're
Right.
watching all of your fellow Marines deploy over, and at this point now we're in like 2006, like, 3 years of activations, deployments have gone by, and you're just watching people sail on, and you're like, come on. So then I transferred from Norfolk to inspector instructor staff, 1st Battalion, 24th Marines in Detroit, which kind of comes full circle because that was the unit I was a
Right.
young reservist corporal in. Now I'm back as a gunny, to become, the battalion admin chief. I showed up at 124 the day their plane returns from an Iraq deployment.
Oh, wow.
So that means that unit is going back into the reset, period. So again, now here's another 3 years going by where I'm not in a unit that's going to deploy because this one just got home, and it was a brutal deployment. I mean, they lost a lot of Marines during that deployment. Sadly, it was a very tough time for 124 and their families. Coming home from that. But then I ended up, I had, like one more enlistment and, one more sort of duty station in me. And I transferred to inspector instructor staff, 1st Battalion, 25th Marines in Boston. And that unit was just ramping up to go on their activation and deployment to Afghanistan. So that was my parting deployment. Bookended the whole career.
Yeah.
Went to Desert Storm, and walked out the door coming home from Enduring Freedom, where we were in Helmand Province doing the base security for Camp Leatherneck.
Yeah.
My job at that point was the interpreter manager, because we had Afghan linguist embedded with the battalion. And so there's all these weird policies and procedures to get them paid, and, how to handle that. So, and at that point, it was like if they did so much time, honorable service, so to speak, as an interpreter, then, they could earn their way toward a path to citizenship. And so that was a lot of fun stuff there. But with all that going on, that's a long way around to say I had no plan post service. I was literally
We
deployed.
had no time. I mean, you started off high tempo, you got a little bit of a reprieve.
Yeah.
Right back.
Right. So, during all that, time, here I am, I'm deployed, I'm actually forward in Afghanistan. We came home. The reserve battalion was still activated. So we had them on site in Boston, which was not equipped to have that many Marines on active duty around. So we had to find things for them to do for the next 6 months until they demob. And so I was literally handling all of those fires all the way up until the day I rolled out the door on terminal leave. And then I just showed up back home and was like, okay. I mean, it was nice because, they had a lot of those hire a hero, hire a vet, super job fairs, but here I was, Mass Sergeant, 23 years in the Marine Corps with all this admin experience, but no college degree. And, like these businesses are like, I don't know, we can start you in the mailroom. And I'm like, nope, never mind. And that was when I made a very weird, bold choice to take a complete turn on a career path. I'm like, well, I'm not going to try and be a civilian HR guy. Like, that's never going to happen. And I did try to apply for, some jobs through like the VA or something like that through like USA Jobs. But that was at a time when we kept having all those government shutdowns and furloughs and stuff like that. And I had an application trickling through the government system. And whatever the last, government shutdown that Obama, laid out there, my application disappeared overnight. They're like, the government's not hiring anymore. Try again later. I'm like, that application had a lot of, uh, so then here I was sitting there like, well, now what do I do? My wife's retired. She got into a government job. So, it's not like we were in a bad way or anything. It's just like, well, I don't know what I want to do. So that was when I ended up going to a local college for illustration. I'd always liked to draw. You know, had been shelved. I mean, sporadically I would draw here and there in the Marines, but you know, just never really, and I tried a couple of times to lat move to Combat Illustrator 4611. That didn't happen. It's like I'd try the Marine Corps, like, oh no, we're gonna get rid of that OMOS. We're gonna civilianize it. So, all right, well then I'll stop. But then as you start to get too senior, I mean, at that point when I was really trying, I was a sergeant. But once you get to like staff sergeant or gunny, they're not going to let you lat move in another field because you're going to leapfrog over the top of everyone else in that field. And that's just not, it's not fair. So my dreams of being a combat illustrator for the Marine Corps never came out. But yeah, so
it's all the right
going to
timing
for
'cause, I mean,
illustration and
yeah. Well, the timing worked out for you. I mean, this is how it was
yeah,
supposed to be, and what you're doing is, I mean, it's incredible. Like I told you before we started the interview, my family. I mean, this is how I discovered you. You have so much incredible talent. It's all over the place. I want to make sure I mention some websites so folks can follow you as well. I know the one that I found most of your work on is Jeff Tunes, which is Jeff Tunes, Toons, folks. That's jefftunes.com, and we'll have a
yep.
link in a bio for you. But you're just so talented. And if you didn't tell me that you didn't take that on as a academic focus until much later in life, I would not have believed that. I would have guessed that you were doing this since you were, a kid. Seriously, I mean, it's fantastic. When I think of you, not to get to too much of an ego, but I think about, because on this show, I have the great privilege to interview folks like you every week of my life. It's fantastic. We all come from different walks of life, but we all conformed. We all served our country. And then when we
Right.
get out, it's like we all kind of rediscover ourselves, or maybe we found something new that, as a result, we that enhanced our lives afterwards. So I've had on artists, I've had on musicians, I've had on, you're an artist, a cartoonist, illustrator, so many labels if you want to put it there, but you got talent. And I, I I'm somewhat biased when I'm looking for things to enjoy in life. If I'm looking for music, I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking about veterans who perform music. So when I think about you, I think about there's other veteran folks in your camp. This is the world you're in now. So you got Charles Schultz, from Peanuts. He was in the service. You think about like Ralph Newman was a lot of people would know him from like the Richie Rich comics.
Yeah.
So this is the world you're in that you didn't know you could be in.
Oh yeah. I mean,
And
before I went in the Marine Corps, I was familiar with George Baker's Sad Sack. I
sure,
love Sad
sure,
Sack.
sure.
I couldn't understand half of those gags. I mean, they translate universally.
Yeah.
But after I got in the Marine Corps, I was like, oh, I totally get Sad Sack now. And the his artwork, his penmanship, the way he draws is so fantastic.
It, it,
He
it's
was an
it's
inspiration.
incredible, and I just love the connection that the folks that were in the service. We have obviously discipline. We have
Yeah.
obviously a structure of how we get through our workday, which is why a lot of us seem to excel in the right environment. All things being equal, if you have an opportunity, a veteran's going to excel a little bit, I would think, because you have some things ingrained. into your work life at a very young age.
Yeah.
So in the Army, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in the Army, there was a private first class who did get one of those jobs you referenced. He actually was an illustrator for the Army. So a long time ago during the, I believe he joined in the mid to late 70s. You know what? I might be off. I don't want to misquote the date, but short version is, and you might know the name off the top of your head, obviously doing what you're doing now, but it's Will Eisner. So he did,
Oh yeah.
yeah. He started off as a PFC. I still have it because I have the whole collection. Folks, I'll catch you up to speed. Hold on. Sorry, Jeff and I are having a moment. We're fanning out on some cartoons. But Will Eisner was a PFC in the Army, and one way or the other, he started off in the motor pool. I think his first MOS was in the motor pool of some sort. He might have been like a 88 Mike or working on engines. I'm not positive on what it was. However, they wanted him because he was a doodler. He was doodling, 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 right? Everyone knew he was a fellow that would do caricatures of, probably not very flattering ones of the officers. So one thing led to another, and he was asked to make some safety posters because the command at the time found that there was a whatever, some really lazy habits going on that was causing some serious problems with the machines and the engines. So a poster turned into a booklet. The booklet turned into an actual comic book. So folks, if you're looking up and wondering where the story's going, it's a PS magazine is what it's referred to as now. Preventive maintenance, there's PMS or whatever the acronym is.
Yeah.
So he started doing that, and it's fun because I have the whole collection, which went on for decades, and it goes with his rank. You see him go from PFC to Spec 4, Spec 5 back in those days, eventually Sergeant, goes out as an E8. And then later on in life, he got into graphic novels and wound up doing some Comic Cons before he passed, which
Oh
was
yeah.
crazy. So when I think of what you're doing, like that's the level and realm I see your skill set is. You're
Oh
you're well, seriously, you're among the greats now, and all of them have passed on. They're all serving a higher commander on the other side here. So you're carrying the baton there, Jeff. You gotta.
I can't thank you enough, but geez, that don't even try to put me in the same world as
No,
Will.
you are.
That,
You got the talent.
that,
So walk me through how that turned into a career though. How did that, because I understand you went to school and you picked up some skills
right,
there, but I mean you obviously had the talent and you had to go use that talent to get into a position. How did
right.
that come about for you?
So while I was going through, Macomb Community College, which is here in Warren, Michigan, they have a really nice media arts and communications program. And so I started out in a general studies plan, and quickly I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna use the GI Bill. I'm gonna go for this creative imaging and illustration program, we called it. So I'm trucking my way through an associate's degree on that. And in between semesters, I was sitting here at home, and now I'm starting to get more into the headspace. I'm about 24 months post service. I'm having a little bit of a rough time, adjusting back to civilian life, right?
Sure.
Because you just see everything as a Marine, and trying to turn that part of my brain off because very analytical, right? I'm not artistically creative. We're creative problem solvers, but that creativity does not translate to art. That's more
Correct.
like
Correct. Not normally. Yeah.
problem solving, right? Finding creative ways to fix problems in the Marine Corps is not the same as trying to, understand the fundamentals of design, which that class was melting my brain because, very first lesson, the instructor's like, all right, we're going to try and today we're going to draw something using only line. Okay. Line, just draw a straight line, but it can't look like anything. It has to be abstract. And I was just stuck. Like, I was like, maybe I can't do this. Maybe I should go back to, become a Microsoft engineer or something, because I can't wrap my head around this concept that you're trying to teach. But eventually it stuck. I got that helped actually with my transition because it got me back like out of my own Marine head. So yeah, I'm in between semesters, and I'm watching this YouTube series that Nickelodeon Animation had for a while that was called Meet the Creators. And there was these little 5-minute segments where, all the shows made at Nickelodeon, they're very what they call creator driven studio. And, you pitch an idea and, they like it and it goes through development and eventually gets greenlit and becomes a show. So I'm watching this, segment from Butch Hartman, who created the show Fairly Odd Parents, and Danny Phantom, and it's kind of like another small, the town that I live in here in southeastern Michigan is the same small hometown that Butch Hartman came from.
Oh, no kidding.
And so when I pay my water bill, there would be a picture of Butch Hartman and, and the Fairly Odd Parents characters in the little trophy case. This is a little town just outside of Detroit. And so I'm like, wait, because again, I came up through, I'm a Hanna-Barbera Looney Tunes kid, Gen X, through the 80s, born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s.
Yep.
And nobody ever told you could do art back then. Like, you were a crazy person if, it's like, I'm going to be a cartoonist when I grow up. You're like, you're nuts. Go take a ditch. There was no support for it. So now here I am at 43, 44, and I'm like, wait, you could actually do animation as a job? Like, people would pay you to do that? It's crazy. And so then I went down the rabbit hole and I watched all the Meet the Creator videos. And I was like, wow, this is wild. Now you hear the personal stories of these, amazing artists that did these shows. So I applied for the Nickelodeon has an intern program out in Burbank. And I was like, I read the criteria. I'm like, well, it doesn't say how old you can't be.
Right.
So I fired off an application. I was like, whatever. And I went back to class. And, we're wrapping up the semester and they were like, got a phone call. And I'm like, 818 area code. I'm like, I don't know anybody in California. Pick it up. It's like, hey, we'd like to set up an interview for, this intern program. I was like, oh, word? All right. And, one thing after another. And I ended up getting, accepted for the Nick intern program. Mm-hmm. So, talked to my wife. I'm like, hey, I got to go to, California for 10 weeks for this intern program. And because we're both career Marines, it was like, that's like going away to a, MOS or, going away for a PME school. That's just
right,
like,
that's nothing.
That's TAD for 10 weeks. Yeah, you're fine. Or TDY, as it were, in the Army. Yeah, go for it. No big deal. Well, I'm nearing the end of the intern program, and I was working with a production team that created this crazy show called Pig, Goat, Banana, Cricket, which is exactly what it is. It's a show about a pig, a goat, a banana, and a cricket, and it's hilarious if you can find it. But coming out of that, intern program, the line producer says, hey, the show's going to wrap up, but if you'd like a job for the summer, we can bring you on full-time staff for 3 months. Call the wife up, like, hey, so, because she's still back here in Detroit. Like, again, I was only supposed to be TAD for 10 weeks. Right. Now it's turning into a permanent duty station. Like, I got a job offer. She's like, I knew you would, but we'll figure it out. Go for it. So she was super supportive. I can't thank her and love her enough for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I ended up spending the next 2 years in California, flying back and forth. So just worked out great. And after the last show, so I was on another show that's available on Netflix called Pinky Malinky.
Oh yeah, we know that one in our house.
Yeah. So I was a production assistant on both of those shows, which is a weird kind of way. Yep. It's like admin for animation, right? Like, you have the character designers and board artists and painters and all that stuff, and the production team, they're like H&S Company. They're the support for animation. So, you track design assignments and, all that kind of fun stuff. But yeah, so when Pinky Malinky wrapped up, I was like, I got to head back east because I've been missing my son who's now coming up through high school. I'm like, I got to go home. So came back here. I finished up my degree while my son is finishing up high school. And it was like, all right, graduated with, my imaging and illustration degree. I even finished up a secondary in motion design, which is doing, motion graphics. And then I was like, now I'm ready to jump back in. And then 2020 happened, and nobody did anything for the next 2 years during the heavy lockdown periods.
Yep.
And I just, sat here in Detroit doing some, freelance artwork, just kind of kept afloat. And coming out of the lockdown pandemic era, then somebody I know at Nickelodeon, good friend of mine, was like, "Hey, I'm starting out this new department, and if you're available, I know it's not art again, but because she knew I wanted to be an artist, she's like, love to have you help me." And so that was what became known as Studio Learning Development and Engagement, which is a kind of a long title for saying we're like S3 for Nick
There you
Animation.
go. Yeah.
Yep. So all the military guys understand that part.
Yep.
Now I'm in the training department for Nick Animation, or the civilian, learning and development. And so we would host speaker series, bring in guest artists, just our primary objective was, the personal and professional development of the employees at the studio. So we were internal facing. All the things we did were for the employees, setting up different classes, which again, it kind of translates to the Marine, military mindset. Like, all right, set up a class, got to do the logistics for that class, got to, schedule it, so that all that part was great.
That's fantastic. Oh, what a
Yeah.
fantastic story. It's awesome. Oh wow. Well, I gotta ask you because it's always, you never could have predicted this, right? There's
No,
no
never.
way. There's no way at any point while you were in uniform that you could have predicted that this would have led to that.
Right.
So I reflect a lot about my time on the service, and I think about, leaders I had and lessons learned, good and bad, by the way, of both. But I'm wondering if there's something that sticks out in your mind that maybe you didn't notice it at the time, but now it's like, oh wow, like a lesson or a leader or just an example that you saw that actually, helped frame your mind a little bit to where, you benefited from it, even if it was a bad lesson or whatever. But I wonder if there's a lesson or a leader that just kind of sticks out in your mind from your service days.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of nailed it right there. It's like there's just so many, like it's hard to pinpoint a single, I mean, definitely had some very influential and, important Marines in my life. My very first personnel officer when I was at 1st 92nd Marines as a young PFC, you know, like he was a very fair leader. Like, he wasn't, we all had the type that like loud makes me right. Like, no, that just makes you an insert whatever
Yeah.
word you want, right? But like you can bark at me all day long and the Marine, soldier, sailor, maybe do whatever you want, but they don't respect you. They're just all right, whatever.
Yeah.
But then you have like the fair, decisive leader who talks to you like a person, while also understanding, like, yeah, I totally respect your rank. And, you grow to appreciate them even more because that type of a leader is someone that, not to use the term loosely, but like they're the Marine you take a bullet for. You're like, yeah, I would do anything for this, staff NCO officer, whoever. So, that was the type of leadership by example is how we say it in the Marines. Like I that was just he was the epitome for me. And then my very next perso, his nickname behind his back was Satan because that dude was pure evil. But again, like
You
he
learn
got
from those
results.
too.
They
You learn
weren't
from
the
those
best.
too.
Yep, they weren't the best. They weren't the best results, but we still got them done.
Yeah.
But and then it just first enlistment, right? You're a young knucklehead. You don't know what you're doing. You're kind of feeling your way through it. By the second one, now it's sticking. Like you're like, okay, the pride in service, the pride in uniform, the pride in appearance, doing the very best you can with whatever the job is, taking initiative, like doing the thing that needs to be done without being told it needs to be done because you just see it needs to get done, and all those kind of things are what kind of help, frame the Marine experience for, whether you do 4 years or you do 20, you're going to get some level of that just burned into you. And then of course, there's the Marine Corps. You come out of Marine boot camp a different person. Like you're no longer who you ever were gonna be, and you're forever changed.
Yeah. Best marketing brand of anything ever.
Yep.
I
It's
have a good friend, Brian O'Hare, who's a Marine, by the way, and yeah, he mentioned that quite a bit. It's the one brand that everyone knows
mm-hmm.
what it stands for. We know the type of caliber, no pun intended, although it works. You know what you're getting when you see that. And I love, by the way, how you have the Marine emblem on your website. I love how that's kind of subtly on the main page there when you open
Oh,
it up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, within, each branch has, their own, camaraderie and esprit de corps, as we say,
Yep.
pride in unit, pride in service.
Yep.
But, like my wife and I were at a concert last night, and, it doesn't matter where you are. You can be at a grocery store. You even catch a glimpse of somebody with an Eagle Globe and an anchor,
Yep.
anything they're wearing. And immediately you're just like, hoorah, Semper Fi, what's up? You know, and you get it back immediately, hoorah back, hey, Semper Fi, Semper Fidelis, and you can just see other people like, what is going on? Like, I've never met that guy in my life or that, gal in my life. But I know that he or she is a Marine, and automatically
That's it. Yeah.
we could go get beers right now. I don't
Yeah.
even know your name yet.
That's it. I'll tell you, it's a fun world we live in. It certainly is. So,
Yep.
well, that's fantastic. Well, I'm really glad that you're on a great path. You know, um, I'm enjoying what you're doing. What can our listeners do to follow and support your work? I mean, you mentioned you do some freelance still as well on top of all your other responsibilities, but
Yeah.
what can our listeners do? Obviously, we're all veteran supporters and the community here. What's some of the things we can do to show you some support?
Oh man, I mean I appreciate that. Oddly enough, I'm back on the freelance circuit again because about a month ago, changes in the entertainment industry being what they are, get the notification from Paramount that your services are no longer required. So
Mhm.
Nickelodeon's underneath Paramount, so
Sure.
we got our department got cut, but it's all good. Onward to new adventures, and so now I'm back, and now I'm just internal, doing my own freelance thing, be my own boss again for a while, see what happens. So I'm doing local, Comic-Con conventions here in the southeastern Michigan area
Oh,
for right.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
just had one last weekend that was really fun. Called the Monroe Comic-Con. Looking forward to, whatever's coming out in 2025 I can jump into, because like, yeah, here we are. It's already gonna be October in a minute,
Yeah, it
and
goes
it's
fast.
rolling
Yeah.
into the holidays. So it's like there's no need to get into anything specific.
Well,
Uh
we'd love to have.
yeah. But no, I mean, my website, jefftunes.com, is just kind of like a entry portal. It just gives you a little bit of a glimpse. But I do post a lot of stuff, daily on my Instagram, which is SORNIGRAFIX. Back when I first started, I didn't know what I was doing, and I thought Sornig and graphics, mush them together, Sornig graphics. That's pretty clever. And then I thought, well, let me make it even more complicated. And instead of PHIC, I'll make it trendy or slick and be FIX. Not even thinking like how much of a mouthful that is to try and, like, when you meet somebody, oh, hey. And you're like, yeah, Sornographics. And they're like, I'm sorry, in English? What was that? So if I had known then, I would have grabbed Jeff Tunes out of the gate. But
Yeah. Yeah, well, Jeff Tunes is where I go. I see a lot of
yeah.
your work, and I do follow you on Instagram. I'm new to this stuff. I'm really, you're talking to an AM radio guy here, so it's only in this past year that I've started to even have some of these accounts. And
Yeah,
luckily, Meg keeps me organized, and she does our website and our social media. So
sure.
because of her, I have access, and that's how I found you.
Yeah.
I found your pictures on Instagram and all that. So yeah, it's fun to watch what you're doing, and yeah, we have a lot of great listeners. We have a lot of folks that are sponsoring the show now. There's some companies I know that tuning in. We have a lot of military recruiters, so this could go full circle. Jeff,
Yeah.
maybe you need to do a poster for that recruiter office that said they outsource it. Now you could be the outsource.
Yeah, the old lava monster pulling the Mameluke sword out of that ad campaign back in the 90s was
Yeah, yeah, and there's also a lot of Comic Cons all over the place. I go to
yeah,
some myself. I, I'm very lucky because here in Buffalo, there's a few of them. There's one called Nickel City Con. Big shout out to those guys. They do a great job. And there's one in Rochester, and then I'm pretty close to Canada, so of course there's a really big
oh
one
yeah.
in Toronto, and there's quite a few in this area. And it's fun. I mean, this is the world that I enjoy. That you just happen to be, you
Yeah.
know, you're a professional. I'm one of your fans. So we'll put it that
Oh,
way.
thanks. I appreciate it.
So,
I mean, oddly enough, when I was driving back and forth from Boston to Detroit, I would cut across to Ontario.
oh yeah, yeah, it's a lot faster. It's easier. Yeah.
Well, in Michigan, I don't know about over there on your side, but we have what we call the enhanced driver's license because I could skip a rock and hit Windsor, Ontario.
Oh yeah.
Like I've grown up with Canada as my neighbor my entire life,
Yep.
you know. So, we just have this agreement where on our Michigan driver's license, it basically has your, passport info embedded on it. So when we pull up to the border, like we don't need a passport, we just show our driver's license.
Yeah, it
Because
was like that until the pandemic. Then things got a little more challenging here.
yeah,
But yeah, I'm 10 minutes from Niagara Falls, so it's
yeah,
and the truck drivers that transport automotive parts, they always go through.
right,
People realize that's a lot because you got the Great Lakes. I mean, it's just faster and more cost efficient, more time
for
saved to
sure.
go through Canada to go from Detroit to Buffalo, for example.
Yeah, as opposed to down,
Yeah, yeah.
Ohio, Pennsylvania,
People
those,
don't think about that, but that's half the
right,
traffic every day on the
right,
bridge. That's half the traffic.
yeah,
So yeah, well, this has been really fun. I've enjoyed our time. I like to always ask one fun question at the end.
sure.
And since you're in the world of Comic Con and illustration and the sci-fi isn't too much to ask, right? Let's do a time travel question.
All right.
Oh, imagine
Well,
if you had just a minute or less with your younger self that was sleeping in and got that 8 a.m. call, even before you get the call from the Navy, okay? Now that you know this was going to happen and you have all these lessons, all these life learns, now that you know you have your fantastic family as a result, of course, you both served in the Marine Corps.
yep.
You're doing this now, all that learned, all that knowledge. If you had a minute or less with your younger self, what would be the advice or encouragement you would share with young Jeff?
Oh, immediately I would just be like, never stop drawing. Keep, like, stay creative and just keep drawing because, for a long time there, I let it slide. And, knowing what I know now, if I'd go back then and slap, myself in the head, it would be like, keep drawing, dude.
Right,
It'll work out. Believe me.
right, yeah, yeah. It's definitely when you're in the service, like people don't. Not a lot of folks outside of our community understand that even someone who serves, even just for one enlistment, um, and let's say it's peacetime, they luck out and
Right.
they're stateside. People
Yep.
don't realize you're still sacrificing. You're still putting your own personal interests, your own way of life, your own
Sure.
freedoms. Some of the humor that came out, and I don't mean to say this in this manner, but I guess I could have phrased this better. But when the pandemic started and we started to have a lot of rules that made people uncomfortable, people don't realize that service members have those rules all the time. We have curfews in the military. We have places you can't go, things you
Right.
can't do. So, and to your point, hobbies kind of take a back burner too. Personal interest kind of gets set aside. I've talked to a lot of musicians that didn't play while they were in the service, but they played their whole lives before the service. So it's interesting you mentioned that. And I guess it just reinforces what I like to share with our listeners is that yes, we all conform. Yes, we all serve as a team, one team, one fight, all that wonderful stuff. And that works. That's how we win. That's how we get things done. But we do all have our own unique perspectives of things. We all have our own background stories. And I think that the lesson there that people can take from the military is you can have completely different views, opinions, and everything, different religions, different cultures, everything. And yet you can still be a very highly functioning organization.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of places out there, whether it be corporate companies that you and I both worked for in the past or what have you, there's a lot
Yeah.
of companies out there that should be learning from the military and how, we didn't know anything at 17 years old. We didn't know we didn't have an MBA. We didn't know what we were doing, but we became a very functional component of a very successful organization.
Sure.
So that's what makes us, this veteran community. That's why I'm a little bit biased when I'm choosing all things being equal. I want to know the folks that serve their country and get to know their story a little bit better, and then hang out with them. Like you said, you can see another Marine in any environment. You're immediately friends.
Right. And I have to give a shout out and big thanks to the Paramount Veterans Network, which within the organization, they have what they call employee resource groups, which, have, very specific functions and who they advocate for. And there's a very, very lovely person named Betty Diaz who runs the Paramount Veterans Network. And it's just an internal advocacy department, that all veterans who happen to be Paramount employees just, can kind of gravitate to. And that was a long way around to say that's how I got into attending it was, I think, the VIE seminar a year ago, which led me to Parade Deck, which I had never heard of, paradedeck.com, I think.
Right.
So I created a profile on Parade Deck,
And that's how we
which
found
is
you.
how
Yeah.
Meg found me. So,
Yeah,
like,
that's
full
how we
circle,
found
I'm
you.
like, you know, again, it's like you look at it in hindsight, and you're like, wow, had I not been here at this point, an opportunity over here wouldn't have opened up. So,
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's great that Paramount does. I wish more companies had a dedicated program, even if it's
yeah,
just a casual networking group, but just like say, hey, just raise your hand if you're a veteran, and then just, have your own little subgroups, social engagements or whatever, because it's, in my opinion, and I know I'm biased, but, you know,
yeah,
I can't think of a better skill set to have than someone who knows how to take orders, usually by some stranger yelling at them while they're doing push-ups. Everything's kind of a little bit easier after that
yeah.
career.
But no, I mean, if anybody who happens to catch this episode wants to connect, I mean, you know, feel free to follow me on Instagram, Sornig Graphics. I'm on LinkedIn too, so if you want to connect through LinkedIn, just drop me a comment. Let me know you heard this on Lima Charlie. That way, but any veterans who want to talk about art or who are maybe interested in a career in animation, because again, it's kind of like a weird sort of terrain. Industry's in a little bit of flux right now, but again, I found it kind of by accident on my own. Like nobody told me how to get there. And everybody's path to animation is different, but it's possible. So, just I'd love to see more veterans get into animation too. So again, anybody who wants to talk cartoons, illustration, hit me up.
That's awesome. Yeah, folks, I'll definitely encourage you to do that. So once again, I had the pleasure and privilege, and frankly, just I had a wonderful time here talking to my new fast friend, retired Marine and incredible artist and creator of all sorts of just fantastic illustrations and content out there, Jeff Sornig. And I will encourage you to check out his website to learn more, which is jefftoons.com. So thanks again for joining us today, and I will definitely be looking forward to what's next in your future, and we'll be there to support it.
I really appreciate the time today, and this has been amazing. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you.